is child abuse to have children or bring children into this world if you don't have reasonable access to wealth. And we're gonna see if it is or isn't child abuse. I suppose that's the determining factor. And yeah, I'll Footsoldier, you wanna start with something, or I can start with something if you don't have anything.
Um, well, I can start off by saying a couple of things. So, there's a few surveys performed, and one of the ones that come to mind, and I don't have it to hand right now, but you can just Google this and confirm it if you like. The average American, and this isn't me. This isn't like an absolute average. I think this is going to be median value of savings that the average American has is less than $5,000, right? And in order to deplete those $5,000, there's many things I could do to deplete. I could, like, I can't even buy a car in America for that much money. If I want a decent car, I need to spend more than $5,000. So most people don't have enough money to buy a car. So if they need to transport their child or something, and they want to have like a family and they need a car for transport because maybe they don't live in the city or whatever. Although I'd promote living in the city personally. Let's say they live outside the city, they need a car or whatever. Well, they can't even do that. They need to get debt out in order to do that. And then in order to pay back the debt, they're going to need more money to pay back the debt than if they just had savings and bought the car. So they're going to have to work harder to pay that off. And when you look at all of these things, all of the costs involved in raising a child to the age of 18, I've seen wildly different figures on how much it costs. Some of them around or $500,000 per child, or $1 million per child, or whatever. It's a lot. It depends on what statistics you look at, but it's a lot of money. It's very expensive to have a child, to the point where most people who are in the situation where they earn less than $5,000, and you're not really going to be able to support a family on that amount of money when you have no savings, you have no buffer for risk, you have any problem that comes up, you're just going to fold to the problem. And then what's going to happen is everyone in today's society is like, oh no, it doesn't matter because everyone has children anyway, and we've got welfare, and I can get loans, and I can get government help, and I can get this, and I can get that. But I think we'll agree, having a similar financial sort of position, that the second you base your ability to care for your child off of welfare, government welfare, what you're saying is, oh, it's okay if I don't have money to raise my child, I'll have the government steal someone else's money, and I'll have someone else's money stolen, and then I'll raise my child on someone else's money. They can pay for my child because I've not got enough money myself. I'll get someone else to pay it. That's fine. But then you're raising your child in a way which I would consider is unethical. And now we've just changed the proposition, haven't we? So I'm not arguing that it's unethical. We've now changed it to that.
I mean, you can say unethical in the context of stealing. I don't mind.
Yeah, because my position here was going to be that it was unethical, but the proposition now is that it's child abuse, right?
I mean, I'm flexible. I mean, if you want to add that, I'll accept it.
Yeah, because I was going to say that one-parent family was child abuse, and I've got empirical evidence for that, but we're not arguing that today. So, can I argue that it's child abuse? I'm not sure. I can try and argue that it's child abuse.
Sorry, was the one-parent family to do with welfare plus one-parent family?
Yeah, so I was going to argue that the one-parent family was child abuse, and the welfare part of it was unethical. So Yeah, but
It's fine.
let's
I'll take it. I'll take it from where you started, and then we can have a back and forth. Yeah, is that okay?
yeah, cool. Yeah, what I would say though, I can still additionally argue for it being child abuse because what I would say was people with lower ability to pay for their children, lower socioeconomic status, generally pass this off onto their children. Also, with the social status of the parents is often inherited by the children. So, social mobility um, generally happens when the parents uh, work really hard, like we've seen in the Chinese immigrants. They work really hard, they save up money, and they put their kids through like decent universities, and then upward social mobility occurs. Right. So when in the case that you fail to have enough money, fail to have enough savings, and you just rely on welfare, you're actually abusing your child in that you're deliberately bringing a child into this world which you know you can't give the best for, and they're going to have lower socioeconomic status as a result. They're going to have higher levels of potential for crime, higher levels, um, slower cognitive development, and all of these negative things based off of the socioeconomic status when you could have just um, been more financially secure. So we can go from there. That's just the background.
Okay. Um, that was a lot. Maybe I should have written some of that down. So I would say that um, the reason why I took on this debate and how I understood it was I see a lot of couples today waiting a very long time to have children. It's usually to do with their um, negative view of what the market would be in the future and a sense of hopelessness about it and the sense of bills and commitments and student loans and things of that nature, and how could we possibly have a child until we are in our 30s or even mid 30s, where we've paid all of this off, and that in doing so you reduce the number of children you can have, obviously, because the window of age to have children is, like, let's say between 20 and 40, or maybe, obviously, maybe high, but let's say 20 and 40 for argument's sake. And if you start at 35, then you can only have one or best two children during that phase. And you may not want it. You may want more than one children, and because to you having children is a very purposeful and meaningful experience, and you you find great joy in bringing children to the world, and you want to give them the best and have them develop as best they could. I don't entirely agree, therefore, that it's a good idea to wait to have children, and the reason till you all have more income, and the reason why is that from my experience, I when we were thinking of having children, I changed my outlook on life, and I took things a lot more seriously, and I earned more money as a result, and because I felt like I really needed to, and it felt like people were depending on me, and that I made it work, even though there were ups and downs, and even though this was like slightly after the recession. We just made it work, and I uh, I think that it is possible for parents to do that. I think that basically, if if parents really wanted to have kids, they would work harder, they would find better paying jobs, they would try harder, they would save harder. If they have access to their parents may help them. I agree with Foot Soldier about not relying on welfare, and I don't think that. I mean, obviously, there are some people in the population that do that, and there are some people in the population even, and I've met some that use that welfare like instead of having a job, like they just have children as a form of just having money. Or at least I knew at least one person who did that. I would say that's unethical, and that's probably child abuse of what I saw from reality of the children that grew up there. But I think that the majority of us, when we think about having children, we're just very much concerned about the future, and we're very pessimistic, and we can't see how we're going to make it happen. But I would like to say to the people listening that we can there is a way, and we can try hard, and we can make things happen if we choose to, if we take things seriously enough. Um, I'm just trying to see if I remember all of Foot Soldier's points. I would also say that um, there is also obviously the multi-generational thing where parents scrimp and save to their children, to the next generation, to have a better situation. We see that in immigrants. We see that in that come with no money at all, either to the UK or to the US, and the generation after them is earns a lot more money, even if they didn't go to university. But I would say a lot of immigrants, that is something that they care about a lot. Um, so it's not as tragic as people may seem, and I may have a graph to the effect of multi-generational wealth. Futsal, did I miss any point of yours?
Well, I, I I didn't like have like a complete list. I was just freestyling, and I think
Okay.
you've put some nice things on the table that we can discuss. So what I would say is the first few points you made, um, maybe they were good, maybe I disagree with them slightly, but I didn't know if they were entirely relevant because you were talking about the parents, and although we might have some other conversation in which we talk about parents, for the purpose of this debate, we're talking about the child, whether it's child abuse, and where, what the parent feels is another thing to how the child, the outcome for the child. So whether the parents are like, oh, we'd really want a child or whatever, that doesn't really matter. That's not child abuse if they're not having a child and they're just thinking about it and delaying it. That's not child abuse. Child abuse is child, and you are doing something which is counterproductive to the development of the child through some negligent or irresponsible pathway. So that then you made some other points that I agree with about welfare being unethical. So we don't need to debate that because we're on the same page in terms of like the people like professional parents in the sense of they pump out children to get money from the government, right? That we agree that's unethical. Um, so what I would say though is having spoken to you a couple of times, having seen you debate other people, I would say that your IQ is higher than 100. Your IQ is probably upwards of 120. And so in the bell curve of the population, or just in terms of percentile of the population, you're probably in the top 5% or smaller than the top 5%. Not everyone is able just to be like, oh, I want to have a child or I'm having a child, so boom, I'm just going to go out and earn more money. Most people aren't in that position where they can reskill or retrain or just have some, oh yeah, today I think I'm going to get a better job and earn more money. You can do that. Maybe I can do that to a certain extent. If I want to earn some money, I can go out and earn a bit more money than I currently earn. If I really wanted to, work a bit harder and do certain other things. Yeah, sure. But most people aren't in that position. Most people don't have the intellect just to go out and be like, boom, I'm just going to dominate today and earn more money. Most people have to get jobs. And when you're just like working at a supermarket, stocking the shelves, and your IQ is like 93 or something, you're not the kind of person who's just going to be like, yeah, boom, I'm just going to start a new business here. I'm just going to do that here. Maybe employ a few more people here so I can increase the cash flow happening in this company that I already own or something. That's all just completely foreign to the person who's working stocking shelves. The person stocking shelves is going to say, oh, I want more money. So they're going to go to Google and they're going to knock on the door of Google and say, oh, can I work here? I want more money. They're going to say, what can you do? They say nothing. And they say, okay, well, we don't need you then. Right. That's the situation. Like most people, they can maybe get better jobs and work hard and stuff like this, like over a long term. But I think that it's very few people who can um, just out thin air just increase their income at short notice. I like probably quite a minority people could do that. But maximum respect for you to you for like being like, oh yeah, I'm gonna have a baby, I'm gonna increase my income. Maximum respect. But I just don't think that fits most of the people. So for the context of the debate, I would just say most people can't do that. Most people are going to have relatively stable incomes, or maybe minor increases in income, or maybe they need to go to university for 3-4 years to reskill, so then they can get a better job and then pay back that debt, or go on an apprenticeship. I would actually say apprenticeships are probably a better pathway to earning more money than than going to university these days. Uh, but yeah, you need to go on a 2-year apprenticeship. You need to do something. You need downtime to move back in with your parents to go and do an apprenticeship to become a plumber, so you can earn 50 grand, 60 grand a year rather than 17 grand a year in Tesco's. But you need time to do that. So if you have a baby, then you say, okay, you're pregnant now, so I'm just going to move in with my parents for 2 years, doing an apprenticeship as a plumber, so I can earn more money 5 years in the future. Like that's not going to help when the baby's being born in 9 months' time. You see what I'm saying there?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I'd like to respond. Just give me one sec.
Sure, man.
I I thank you for the IQ comment. It's actually a bit higher than that, but I appreciate that. Although I do have some neurodiverse issues that kind of like make me a bit different than just people who are in the Mensa Foundation or what. I'm not in that either, but thank you. I don't entirely see people with low IQ as not having enough value to contribute to society. I'm not saying that's what you're saying, but I am saying this. I feel that people have stuff to contribute to society, value to offer to other people in the market at varying ranges of IQ. And I truly believe that whether if you are working in as a quant in a financial company with 150 IQ, or the 90 to 100 IQ billionaire that is hiring that quant, because that's 95 to 100 is usually like the average for billionaires. Or if you have low net and you're opening a nail salon of your own, and you are, cleaning and coloring nails and whatnot, I find all those things of value to other people in society. Obviously, some have value to more people and some have value to a smaller number of people, but it's still valuable to people in society. And I do appreciate that. Um, I actually would think your example of apprenticeship is an excellent idea, but to my point, um, if if for example you were stocking shelves for 17, and it's actually an excellent example, if I think about it. If you're stocking shelves in Tesco for 17,000 pounds, and you need to go back to live with your parents, I'm not saying everyone can, but for argument's sake in the example, you need to go back to live with your parents. Take 2 years off to finish an apprenticeship in order to earn 60,000 pounds. That is an excellent example of what people should be doing if they're serious about having children. Because once like you get that stick, that blue stick that says that a child's on the way, people have like a switch in their brain and they start taking things very, very seriously. Whereas before, it's I work at Tesco, I come home, I play a bit of some video games on the Xbox or something. I've got a girlfriend, and it's getting a bit serious. We're gonna go out for it, and then like the stick that says you're pregnant comes along. People have a switch in their brain, and they start taking things seriously. And if someone would swallow their pride and say, we're gonna live with my parents for 9 months plus another 1.3 months till I reach apprenticeship, and then I can start earning very good money for the rest of my life, no matter what the economy is, because plumber is a decent, in London, plumbers can make a ton of money. Not comparing to finance, but very, very decent money. Um, if you're taking things seriously, that is an excellent example of what I would like people to encourage to think about. Yes, it is hard. Yes, you have to put your nose down and work hard, especially during that apprenticeship in the example. But it's really like the mindset. And I would add, for example, um, in when people do university degrees and specifically like masters and PhD, I'm trying to remember the study, but there were people who didn't have kids that were doing the masters and PhD. Like later in life, and there were people who were doing the master's degree who were parents and needed to take care of their kids. The people who were already parents took the courses very seriously, and usually they scored higher because they don't have time to mess around. They have to get back to, they have to get back to work. They can't chat as much as they like. They just have to get the work done. It's obviously important to them to get a good grade because it may affect their career. And on average, those people get better grades. Um, so yeah, that's what I want to say about it.
Yeah, man. Well, exactly. I think actually we agree like 1,000,000% here, right? So, the example that I raised, it resonated with you, and you're like, yeah, exactly. When people are having children, they need to take shit more seriously, and that's how upwards mobility in society actually works. People don't just whinge and moan about unfair wages. They go and do a bloody apprenticeship or do something or skill up and then get a decent job because they have better skills and they can go out there and offer more value to society and earn more money as a result. 100% agree. The problem is the time lag. So I think we agree 100%, but the issue that I'm presenting here is the time lag. So if you do have that impetus to get off your ass, you're like, my girlfriend's pregnant. Now shit is serious. Like maybe that's 50% of the cases. So we could say for the 50% of the fathers who are like, oh yeah, she's pregnant, I'm going to leave her, then obviously that's child abuse. We can even agree there. But in the 50% of the cases, and I'm being generous with 50% of the cases where the father's like, oh yeah, well now I've got to take shit seriously. I'm going to move in with my parents, sell all of my shit so I can get enough money to save up and do an apprenticeship and become a plumber to earn more money. Like that upwards mobility is the thing that everyone in society takes their hat off to, and they say, yes, well done, that's great. The problem is that upwards mobility takes maybe 3 to 5 years, because before you're earning significant amounts of money, you need to do an unpaid internship for a while to get your foot in the door, right? So then you need to sell all your stuff to be able to pay for that and move in with your parents, which many people aren't willing to do. And then after like maybe the first year, you're starting to like really add value to the company, so they want to offer you a job as like a junior plumber or something. And then after the next year, you've now got some really sick experience. You can take the van and go and do jobs on your own. You can now start to be like getting like a decent wage, and then maybe after like the fourth year or something, you can split off and go self-employed or start your own company. And by the fifth year, you're making that really good money, and you've completed this upwards mobility, which everyone takes their hat off to, and everyone's like, yeah, man, you've really done something great here. Whether it's high IQ, medium IQ, probably not like below 80 IQ, because then it's going to be quite difficult to do that sort of thing. But like for the majority of the population, like 90% of the population, let's say, or at least 80% of the population, that sort of upwards mobility is the stuff that everyone takes their hat off to. The problem, though, here is that if you're doing that as a result of your girlfriend getting pregnant, well, what use is it to the early cognitive development of your child if you've like, firstly, how are you going to support your girlfriend? She's going to need to go on welfare because for the first like 3 years you're not earning decent money. The first 2 years or something, you're not earning decent money. So so initially, once your girlfriend has gone to the hospital, you given birth, and now she can't work, she can't do anything. Then leading up to the pregnancy, leading up to giving birth, obviously she's not going to be at work. So there's this period where she's going to just need to go on welfare. You can't support her because you don't have enough money. And then after, when the child is born, for the first, let's say, 3 years of the child's life, maybe 4 or 5, maybe even 6 years of the child's life, you've not got the financial ability to provide that child with everything that would do the best for its cognitive development and future. You can't, maybe you can't afford You don't. There's many things that might be a barrier. Maybe you can't afford to get a car. Maybe you can't afford to um, like uh, take the child to like daycare or something, or mix with other children as much at daycare facilities, and you can't afford to get the best quality stuff or that. Like, do you know what I mean? I'm not a parent. Like, I've never had a child, so I don't really know what the entire picture of what it looks like raising a baby.
Yeah,
But
I get the idea.
yeah, you get the idea. I'm sure there's a lot of places where having £3,000 a month is going to provide your child with a better upbringing and cognitive head start than having 300 quid a month to rub together. Like, and not having a car, not having any real financial infrastructure there ready to raise a child. Like, so we agree with each other, but apart from this time lag. So I think the time lag is the fact here. So even if we grant that even if we say all fathers become serious after they see that their girlfriend is pregnant or their wife is pregnant, all fathers, let's forget the 50% or however many percent are just like run away and just like leave the mother to do what she wants. Let's forget that, or just say that doesn't exist. Let's say all of the fathers instantly become serious and instantly have this motivation. Even then, you've got this time lag of up to, let's say, between 3 and 10 years, in which the father's not going to be able to. It might even be in a worse situation than before, because if he's stocking shelves for 17k a year and he's got to do an apprenticeship where he's getting unpaid for he's not getting paid for a year, then he's gone from 17 grand to 0 grand, and he's got to pay for his travel expenses and all of this, like in the worst case. So he's actually downgrading his situation in the meantime and being even less equipped to bring up the child. So can you see how that's a problem?
Yeah, I see it. So what we're talking about the timeline. So I would say this. There's a few elements, but the first one will be surprisingly raising a child, especially at the early years of life, isn't as expensive as people think. And I'm disregarding things like if they have a serious illness or condition. I'm talking about like the general public of babies. In the particular example that we gave with the father going on apprenticeship and to do a course, yeah. So i it's it's a more hardcore case when it comes to the lag, because obviously now you're saying, and let's say it's a 2 year apprenticeship, then that is definitely a lag. Arguably, though, at some point they will earning considerably more money because they're on this like career ladder now. That the reason why they started getting on it is because at some point they'll earn a lot more money in the future. But let's say for this, I'll take this example and a different example because apprenticeship is or let's say a gap where you have 2 years where you're not earning that much money in an internship or apprenticeship, that may be like a different use case. But I will take this use case and I'll take a more regular use case. So yeah, in our example, the guy sold his Xbox, sold his all his stuff that he's a growing man. He's not an older child, and
Yeah,
he raised the money. He moved back to his parents, so he's saving money. The apprenticeship does pay a little, not very much, but that's kind of the idea. So maybe not everyone in society can afford to do that, but certainly moving in with the parents can help a lot with that element. If you don't have parents to do that, that is again another factor. And I myself had this problem. Um, but yeah, then you would struggle for 2 years. The parents would help you out. You'd go to charity shops and buy children's toy because believe me, there's like a pile of them there. Everyone gets rid of their children's toys when the children grow up and gives them to charity. So that and you can get like something for like £1.50, which is would be £30 new from a box, and I'm not even exaggerating. You can do those things. You can um, meet up with mothers. There are like well, I'm not sure if this counts as welfare, but there are like free facilities in the community. Like you can go to the library, and there's like a section there for kids, and you can borrow books from the library, and you can spend time with other mothers, and there's communities that you can You can join and they'll like play with other kids and stuff like that. Obviously, nurseries in the UK are free for up to 15 hours a week. If you want longer than that, that's not free. Then you have to pay to the nursery. Or if two parents are working, it's free for 30 hours. But let's say you just use the 15 hours for now. Um, and the parents can help with people can give you hand-me-down clothes second which some people do. It's not seen as a big issue, but what I'm trying to say is with the examples that I'm giving is it's at the very least for the initial stages of life it's not as expensive. Like the baby doesn't need too much if they're either breastfed or with formula. um, it's not that expensive. At some point, you want to get the baby some toys to keep them interested. That I've given an example where that can be not that much money if you go to like charity shops and stuff like that. And I think even some formula companies just give you a box when the baby is born, just like because like they hear it from the hospital and you get like a box from some kind of formula company that here for free, and it's kind of cute. Um, and uh, and then like after the 2 years in the example of the internship, maybe some things will start. Well, you haven't sent them yet to nursery because that's a 3 to 4. So they're still with the mother, and the mother isn't able to work, but they're with their parents, and you're earning a little, and everyone knows and appreciates that you're working hard. But let's put that to one side. Let's go to just flat out you're working at Tesco, and now your girlfriend tells you that she's pregnant. We're using all men as examples here, but sorry, because that's what we can relate to. Um, yeah. So now you're saying, well, look, I have to earn more money. This isn't something I can do. So you either ask Tesco to give you a higher paying job, you work more hours, you save more money, or you find a job which you can do with your manual labor, and because I'm assuming that's what you were doing at Tesco, and earns you more money. I would say that at that point, even with the time lag here, you are actively trying to understand how you can earn more money. And people say, well, if you learn a new skill, you can move to this new job and earn more money. I said, okay, I'm really interested in learning that new skill. What do I need to do? What kind of experience do I get? If I start working at this person, will I get more experience in that? And you need to understand the game. Basically, you need to understand that you will get more money if you have a better skill set, or a skill set, or a skill set that offers more value to the company. It could be staying in the same company, but like working harder, and the boss sees that you're working harder, and he gives you like some more overnight shifts, and he gives you like 8 Mile, straight from the movie 8 Mile. Like you gives you more overnight shifts, and you work harder, and you gain a bit more skill set, and they trust you, and they put you as like a junior manager, and what the usual American like movie that you probably have in your head. You can do all those things. So I would say the costs come later, not certainly not at the earlier stages in life. And it's not as bad as people think. I would though say that a car would be useful, very useful, especially for coming back and from the hospital. Even if it obviously can be a second-hand car, but and it can be a small car, and the engine can be small, and it can be used, and it can be on a plan to pay it off. But it would be very helpful. I mean, I think we had a Ford KA when we did ours. Um, but yeah, it's not as bad as people think, basically.
Okay. Well, I think we're agreeing slightly too much. So let me change some of the factors that we're talking about. So we've currently been talking about essentially South England, modern day, um, people with families, and essentially in situations which are globally, like relative to global wealth, extremely wealthy. Right. So we're taking, let's say, moving in with your parents. Well, we're just assuming, moving in with your parents, but your parents are exceedingly wealthy by global standards. So let's try and now go to the opposite end of the spectrum and see if there's more disagreement. So if we now fly to sub-Saharan Africa, into some parts of the world where, let's say, there's um, two people who are in a relationship, um, and they don't really have enough money for food. They don't have any money at all, in fact, and they essentially just like get by. Like maybe the girlfriend begs for money or something, the boyfriend like collects like coal or some shit, or does like some horrible job where they've essentially not got enough money even really to feed themselves, and then they are just irresponsible and they think, or they just think, oh no, it's fine because it's not child abuse to have a child without access to sufficient wealth. So they would take uh, the opposition to the debate proposition, and they just have a child because they're like, no, no, it's fine. Um, would you see that as child abuse, that they're bringing a child into the world and they have no real reasonable way or expectation of how they could possibly raise this child to any decent standard? Would you see this as problematic?
So I think like we can obviously hit extremes here, where if the parents can't feed themselves in, you know, very poor parts of the world, then it would be, you know, very difficult to raise a child, or the child's quality of life would be lower, at the very least. I would add though that in those parts of the world, people do have a lot of children because that essentially is their pension. Uh, Take an example in sub-Saharan Africa or Africa in most parts of it. People and also like in the West, maybe 200 years ago, people had children as a form of economic insurance policy or pension because you had your farm, let's say, or subsistence farming, and you needed people to work on it, so that would be your children starting from the age of 8. And
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
if you had 8 children, 4 of them might die from, you know, some sort of disease or some sort of something that antibiotics would normally solve, and or like dysentery or something, like it's the area isn't very clean. So people would have 8 children, just presuming that only 4 or half would survive, or that, let's say, in the case of girls, they would be married off and they can't work on the farm, so they would expect some kind of dowry for that amount, for the for them marrying someone else.
Yeah,
Not getting into that particular, but just I'm just giving like painting a picture.
yeah. It's
Um,
also the case in Southeast Asia in many parts. Yeah,
Yes, and here in the West, we are in a situation where we don't need to have kids for economic reasons. We can have kids simply because we want to, and simply because they make our life better and more and give us meaning and purpose for our lives.
yeah,
Which is, yeah, it's a privileged position. I think in general, if you're earning over $23,000 a year, you're in the global 1% richest people. Um,
yeah, yeah. I think so. Yeah, 23 is like, if you compare that to the amount that most people, even in slightly richer countries in Southeast Asia or something like that, where most people got like motorbikes and they're going around and they've got abundant food and they've got like nice basic houses and stuff like this, they're not earning anywhere close to 21 or 23,000 or whatever the figure was.
but
Um,
I think one place where you and I don't agree is I think people who don't yet have children see the commitment to having children as a, or obviously as a huge thing, and in order to reach that situation comfortably, then you need to have savings, you need to work this out, you need to wait till you're 35 years old, after you've accrued and paid off, your student loans and whatnot to some degree, and saved enough money, then you should have kids. And I would like to change people's mind, I suppose, that it's not as bad as people think. It's not as expensive to have babies in the first years of life. It is obviously a commitment. And when you have one, you grow up very quickly and you start noticing, that I don't need that Xbox as much. I know it sounds terrible. I'm sorry. You don't need that Xbox as much. You don't need to go to the cinema as much. You don't need to go to pubs as much. Obviously, here and there is nice. And you start prioritizing your money. Like, do I need a new car, or can I continue with a shitty car and allow my kids to have a private tutor because they're not doing that well in school, and things of that nature. So you start prioritizing things, and you do get by. The children are almost always like your top priority. You can handle so much less with so much less, and you can be content with so much less. You have no idea. I'm not saying it's like I'm not saying it's like condemning you to servitude or something, but you just start noticing this is important and this isn't, and this is
Yeah,
and you make decisions. So I think in that area, I think people may not necessarily agree with me, but I would like them to consider that it's not as bad as they think.
yeah, and I agree with you here. And some of my friends have said the same thing. Like one of my friends, well, a couple of my friends have had children in the past few years, and yeah, some of them have said exactly the same thing. And I can agree with you in many places here, but I think going back to the um, the situation of poverty, you bring up some like just completely factual comments there about this situation of it's a pension to have children. Yeah, I totally agree, but it doesn't change the fact whether it's child abuse or not, because not having the children might lead to distress or starvation of the parents. But we're not talking about that in this conversation. What we're talking about is it child abuse to have children when you don't have sufficient wealth? And
So so I think
so in
I've
this
agreed.
extremer case, I think you can agree to it in this
Yeah.
extremer case, right?
Yes.
Right. So then what what we need to ask is where is this threshold? Where is the threshold? Because then we've sort of agreed with the proposition for half of the world, let's say. But for the rest of the world, in the richer nations, where like if we slide that slider from this terrible poverty in sub-Saharan Africa, we slide it to the right slightly, and we say, okay, now we're in like now we're in Macedonia, for example, and we've upgraded the situation slightly, and now they have sort of like an alright amount of food. It's not the best food. Um, they can supply the child with clothing and stuff like this, but they're not really rich enough to really give um, any real nice like cognitive benefit or upbringing to the child. The child is probably gonna be a farmer, or the child is probably gonna be a low skill labourer for the rest of its life, and it's never really gonna have a chance of that upwards mobility and wealth because it just doesn't have the education, just doesn't have the head start in life that it would have done if the parents had more access to wealth.
Okay.
Would you consider that child to have been um, like in two worlds where the parents were much richer and the world that they were like, oh no, fuck it, let's have the child anyway now, we don't care. Like, would you call that like negligence or abuse?
Um, I don't think I would call that negligent or abuse on the part of the parents. I mean, I'm, putting aside like, um, actual like, you know, that they did something careless or something like that. Like but I think we need to be careful here. That's saying basically, if you want to have children, it's a rich man's game. Like poor people should not be allowed, and they need to get a license from the state or
No,
something.
no, not arguing for license.
I'm exaggerating your position, but I'm just trying to
Yeah,
like paint the picture. I think all people of all economic backgrounds at the very least should should have kids, and there are various degrees that to some degree I would say obviously if it's on the stark lower end of the economic spectrum, then the child's life would be of lower early life at least would be of lower quality and they would struggle more, but that doesn't mean that they won't have an opportunity later in life to do well for themselves and regret not being born. For example, I think we already agree on that example, but I would say like even in Africa, Nigeria, Eastern Europe, like if you come from a very poor background, and there are stories like this, like obviously it's not everyone, but you could still do very well at school, you can try very hard, you can open up, yeah, sorry, not open up businesses necessarily, though you can, but you can work very hard, you can try very hard, you can like improve your life. And I would say that that is kind of like a theme. Basically, I I had like a harder life than my children did. and even if I had a harder life outright, like I had a harder life plus we didn't have any of the internet and the phones and all the gadgetry and even carpeted floors. Well, I did, but before, like the generation before me, we didn't have carpeted floors around the house and stuff like that. But every generation is like has it necessarily easier. Now, yes, some extreme parts of the world, the child will have a lower quality of life, but maybe they're in a community, maybe they don't care that they're sometimes hungry, but they have a lot of friends there and they play, and it's like it's difficult to quantify what like a good childhood consists of. Obviously, like if they have a lot of scarcity, it's not nice, and it may even hurt the development of the child mentally if they are missing particular vitamins. But assuming it's not stark, like they could have a lot of friends, they could play a lot of football in the yard, even if they don't have like an Xbox, and if they don't have all these gadgets that we have in the West, they could just enjoy themselves in other ways, like we did before those things existed. And I would say once those children are grown up and they have children, their children would have an easier life. So I don't think necessarily it would be a good idea to say that it's child abuse and cut it off. Like it may be like you have a lower, like a worse position starting off in life, but please do give it a try, and please spend time with your kids and do the best you can. And I think if everyone just does that, then we'll eventually move towards everyone being rich materially and everyone being rich spiritually. I don't think we should say I wouldn't say it's child abuse, but I would acknowledge that it's a low quality of life.
Right. I think there's something to differentiate here. So, it sounds like you were interpreting the proposition as a normative claim when actually it's more of a descriptive claim. So, to give an example, I wouldn't say, "Oh, this is child abuse, therefore poor people shouldn't have children." That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is, poor people that have children, we can look at this and see that because of the reduced quality of upbringing, this constitutes child abuse. I'm not. We're not saying therefore anything. We're not saying this is child abuse. Therefore, you shouldn't have children. It's just a descriptive claim. It's just saying, look, this seems to be like if we take two worlds, one in which the parents had substantial wealth, and the other world in which the children, that the parents are too poor to raise the children in the optimal way. In that world, there is like essentially a form of child abuse going on, and to the extent that the children are deprived is to the extent that it constitutes like the full meaning of child abuse. Like, so obviously it's not like an off and on thing. So just because they don't eat dinner one day in their entire upbringing, this doesn't mean that they were abused as children. That's not what it's meant. It's like in the severe case, it's child abuse, and there's a psoriasis paradox going on of how much constitutes child abuse, like how much abuse or how much neglect constitutes child abuse, but at some point it's child abuse. And I would argue that it doesn't matter what country you are in the world. Like, let's say if we go to Thailand, for example, a country that I've been to several times, you'll see people who have quite a low income, maybe $1,000 a month income for like the whole family. They don't have that much money, but they essentially have everything they need. They have an abundance of food. They have access to education. They have access. They're fully literate. They're going around and they're fine, and it's great, and the people are happy, and it's cool. So relative to Thailand, inadequate access to wealth might have to be like really severe compared to the West. So in the West, inadequate access to wealth might be like you've got less than 500 quid a month, and then it's just like you can't raise a child at that point without neglecting it because you just don't have the money. And in Thailand, it might be like less than a couple of hundred quid a month, below that point, you just can't raise the child without there being negative effects. So it doesn't matter about an actual figure. That's why I didn't like give a figure like $1,000 or something. But what it is more like, everywhere in the world, relative to the country as a whole, there is some standard of wealth, some poverty line, some threshold at which when you go below, you're just not going to provide your child with adequate care and the ability for good upbringing. And that's all the proposition is getting at. And I would say that the amount of people who have children, in every country in the world, quite a large amount of people fall below that threshold. And even in the UK, the amount of people who are so poor that they have cognitive development issues for their children because they're just not feeding them right, they're not providing with things that they need, is actually it's larger than a lot of people think. So I think that on one hand, the proposition is trivially true, and you sort of agree with it in the case of Africa. But it's trivially true in terms of in every nation in the world, there is some threshold at which, when you go below, you're going to not be able to cater for your child optimally. But outside of it being trivially true, I think it's actually the case that it's just empirically observable in the UK that there's plenty of people from poor families who just don't have enough money to provide for their children in the optimal way. And I think we agree a lot here. I just think maybe what's happening is you might see that there's some threshold at which I would need to argue for, which you don't think is sort of like met in the general population or something. But I don't know what is the disagreement we're having here, because I think we're on the same page with most of this, right?
Well, I mean, maybe we're. I mean, I would say that if if you don't have enough money, or you don't have access to resources either from family or like maybe even welfare, but either from family to a situation where, or
But let
charities,
me just
or
let me just
charities even.
jump in. Let me just jump in there though. If you've got parents who are just
Yeah,
giving you money, that's access to wealth.
yeah. Okay, so I would say that if those conditions don't give the child enough, don't allow the child to physically develop and biologically develop to like a decent standard, like, you know, not enough nutrients for the brain to develop, or like the growth is stunted or something like that, then I would say that would be that would have met my minimum for,
Yeah.
you know, this is abuse. But so I'd like to think that's not the general population, like you mentioned, but that would be my minimum. Like if for some reason like the parents can't meet that, and I'd like to think that you know, in the West we have more opportunities to meet that, or like at the very least everyone should have access in the West to not get their children in that state, either by themselves, their family, by charities certainly. Charities will always handle the more extreme cases very well. Um, but if you can't meet that, that would be child abuse.
Right. So the thing is though, the malnutrition amongst children that you're talking about as your minimum standard is actually maybe higher than you think. So 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 obviously, if your child is dying of malnutrition, then that's so far over the threshold. It's just obviously you're going to agree that that's child abuse. But that like every year, I'm just googling it here on my phone, walking along. There's something like, I think there's 350 deaths in a year from just children dying from malnutrition in the UK, and then you've got something like 4% of children in the UK are malnourished. I think it's 4%. I'm just gonna have to go into the article and double check because I'm just on my phone here walking down the street. But
Well,
I think it's higher than you think.
I'd like to ask then, where do the food banks come in? Because there have been a lot of donations to them, both from individuals and from companies. And they, at the very least, should step in. Now, I'm assuming you mean like people in the north of England, potentially, that may not have access to certain foods. But I would like to draw a distinction here between, is it the case, and I'm maybe being a bit harsher, is it the case that the parents just get them like takeout all the time because they don't have time to make food or microwave food?
Yeah,
And
yeah, sure. But I can even agree with that. But the thing is, people of low socioeconomic status are going to be more likely to feed their children McDonald's, right? So it's not just the case that, oh, they don't have enough money, so they're going to McDonald's. It's like, no, people who come from the culture of a lower socioeconomic status are more likely to feed their children McDonald's, not because of the money that they have, because actually rice and beans are cheaper, but because of the low socioeconomic status. It is exhibits this behavior more often. So if they had social mobility before having a child, then maybe they would no longer be the type of people who take their children to eat at McDonald's every day. But just looking at this malnutrition in the UK, it says here the government does not collect routine data on food poverty and has largely left the charitable sector to deal with the consequences. Recent international data shows, however, that a much higher percentage of children in the UK, 10%, are living in severe food insecurity compared with other European countries, where the average is 4%. So even in the average in Europe is 4%, but in the UK it's 10% of children are living in severe food insecurity. So
it's interesting. The food insecurity thing is also something cited in America. It doesn't mean that you will necessarily go hungry, or it may mean you may go hungry sometimes, but it doesn't mean like you'll starve. It just means that the source of food isn't secure. Like you can't guarantee it at all times. But
yeah,
a
yeah,
lot of
but it's not optimal for development, is it?
so I'm not clear, and I'll say why. A lot of the time, when people use the stat food insecurity, it's usually in countries that have a very high obesity rate. And so obviously they use it in like a sort of, I'm not going to say hyperbolic way, but they use it because they can't use starvation, so they use food insecurity as a sort of different metric to still alarm you with. So I'm not entirely sure how to accept food insecurity, but as far as I understand, it means like that you may not have, it's not guaranteed, like you don't have enough money, you may not be able to buy the next meal, and as a result, like it's food insecurity. But I mean, the example of your rice and beans, at the very least, like the educational, like if those parents, even if they come from a low social economic background, I mean, would it not be the case that if they just researched on the internet that they have access to on their phones, about better meals, cheaper meals, making it at home, obviously takes a bit longer, and if they're coming in from like a full day of work, that in and of itself can be an issue. But is it not like in this particular situation, if they research the topic of nutrition a bit more within their means, they will have better food security and better quality food for their children?
Yeah, yeah, they might well do. But the thing is, before social mobility happens, they're just simply, by virtue of being poor, they are simply in that category of people of lower socioeconomic status who just eat shit food and raise their children eating spam and lard on white bread, right? That's the sort of
Mm,
like I
delicious.
when I was a kid, like a bit off topic, but when I was a kid, like I literally I lived in like quite a poor area, like with lots of council housing uh to the east side of London, so not in London, just 20 kilometers east of London, and where Russell Brand grew up, same area, and so there, like I went round people's houses sometimes, obviously, as you do as a kid, and you'd get a snack or something to eat around your friend's house and stuff. And I literally, some of these families were feeding me like literally like it was spam on toast, right? It was grilled. It was like you put like a white piece of bread under the grill with spam on top and some other shit, and like the grease that dripped out of it, it was vile. Right? I can remember just like being a kid and just being like, oh, this is dirt. Like I didn't really eat all that wonderfully when I was a kid. Like I had a lot of like frozen crap food and like fish fingers and pizza and alpha bites and all that sort of shit and packets of crisps and stuff like this. But like these families were like legit just eating like spam on toast. And this just seems, it doesn't necessarily seem to be something about actual money. Like because if you have enough money to buy crisps and like crisps and all this junk food, and the Mars bar, chocolate bars, and all this shite that they feed their children. If you've got enough money for that, you've got enough money to buy rice and beans and fresh fruits and vegetables, or frozen fruits and vegetables, and cook some food up. You got enough money for that. So it doesn't seem to be just in access to money. It seems to be that the lack of uh, lack of wealth places them in a culture of low socioeconomic standing, which increases the likelihood of them subsequently feeding their children spam on toast. And so that all ties in. So where we're at in the discussion now, I guess, is you've agreed to the proposition in the case of sub-Saharan Africa in extreme poverty, and you agree to it in other places, even in the UK, in the case of
Well,
malnutrition.
well,
I've
it's
quoted 10% food insecurity in the UK. So now I don't know where we are now, but I'm not really sure where the goalposts lie to convince you of the proposition.
So the word reasonable is in the proposition.
Right.
So I would take out the extremes at the very least, but um, so I'm not gonna like hound for like a victory or anything. I'm glad we had the conversation in general. I would say though that I accept the point about your culture, the cultural or the lowest socioeconomic, and I would even say, and I would add to it, that if I recall correctly, there was a commission in America about food poverty or food insecurity, and a lot of people like came to this commission and they were like talking in front of people, and they were saying, we don't have access to fresh food, we don't have access to this, and they were obese. Every person coming in to talk about, like 75% of the people coming in these poorer communities were obese. So
Right.
I take that on. I think I think we can do more work here. I don't think it's to do with, obviously we agree it's not to do with wealth, but more with education and perhaps even culture.
Right. But
And
that ties into wealth, right?
well, I mean, I could say this. In the same respect, there are poor communities in Italy that cook their own food, grow their own food, cook their own food. It's called slow cooking. They enjoy the process. It's a communal thing where they like, take peas out of pods together and stuff like that, and they eat very, very well.
Yeah.
And there are other communities in the world, that aren't, super rich and live, till the age of 100. So I would say that not knowing how to feed your child, or like not taking it seriously in some sense, or not knowing the implications of it, because junk food is just so accessible and it's so easy to prepare and you don't need to work too hard. And maybe it took a while, maybe there was some lag time till people realized the consequences of this, but I'd like to think that today it's more known. I mean, yes, I had oven food, but I remember even in my time, like there was like an understanding of nutrition and stuff like that. Um, at the very least, I remember very, very well that fat is bad at the time, and sugar is better, or something like that. Fat was bad when I was young.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
Still
it's a
bad.
better understanding than when I grew up. Where
It w-
I grew up in a single parent family, and like the nutrition was just like uh, probably the only nutrition thing is like liver has lots of nutrients or something, so you should eat liver or something like this like once a month, and the rest of the time it was just like basic, like frozen junk food sort of stuff, like and like sometimes like some Italian food, but generally like a low quality of nutrition. And like since I've learned about nutrition and stuff, I've taught my mum, and now my mum eats really well. But she just didn't know because we just came from a low socioeconomic background, and wealth. What I'm trying to argue here is that wealth plays a part in that, because if we had a wealthier background, um, and the debate isn't just about money. It's not just about, oh, you like if I dropped like £1 million in your bank account, uh, problem solved. No, it's about wealth. And if you've got money, you don't necessarily have wealth. Wealth is more of the fact that if you've got wealth, like for example, you own assets, you own stuff which you've got access to wealth, not just like some cash. So people who are more wealthy, have got reasonable wealth, have like they come from a higher socioeconomic status where they know that feeding their children Mars bars and spam on toast is going to be bad for them. That's child abuse. They know that. But the low socioeconomic families come from this culture where they don't know that because they don't have the wealth. They don't have wealth in more of a holistic sense, and not just money, because as we've already discussed, they've got enough money to buy beans and rice. That they need twice or three times the amount of money as beans and rice in order to buy all the chocolate bars and junk food. So they've got enough money, but they don't have enough wealth. And yeah, like people with low wealth don't necessarily have to have like no money. Like if you live in like a council estate, and it's like your dad's like a plumber, yeah, earns a bit of money. You've got a big TV. I remember, like I can recall one of my friends who his dad was a plumber, and he had this massive TV before flat screens existed, and before I knew they existed anyway. And it was this like projection one where it was like projected, so it was almost like a canvas, like a cinema or something. And it was like this massive TV, and he had all the games, all the Xboxes, like with the first before Xbox, it was like I can't remember what back then, but he had everything. He had everything that he could want. But they were just like this family who from like a low socioeconomic status background, and they just ate horrible food, Mars bars, chocolate bars all the time. The children like didn't enjoy school at all. They didn't do well in school. They just like the standard story of they had more wealth, and from a high socioeconomic status, the children would have done way better. And yeah,
I take it on. I would say this. I think I'd like to. I think also we're coming to the end of our discussion, but I'd like to add like two elements to this.
yeah,
Um, so I obviously take on the fact that people of lower social economic status may not have access to this knowledge, or may not have had access to this knowledge, but I'd like to think maybe now they do, or maybe they at least can find it if they look for it. And I would also add that this is a bit of a cheap shot, but Warren Buffett eats like McDonald's and ice cream all the time, and he's like 80 something, and he always has eaten really bad. But he's an example. I would obviously say that maybe people who are richer would just like to impress their friends, like look for richer foods, and then like that the bill is higher at the end of the bill, at the end of the restaurant or whatnot, and they would like, and those may necessarily be healthier. Uh, Obviously, like if you're a busy person in this, a busy financial trader, you may eat crap all the time, and even though you shouldn't, you may just do that. So there's a bit of a mix here with regards to social economic status and understanding about nutrition. But I would add one other thing, that a lot of the stuff that you mentioned, like the spam, the Mars balls, those are things like to some degree subsidized by the government. Like certainly meat is subsidized.
yeah.
You probably know this better than I do. and
Yeah, I agree with
sugar
that.
to some degree was subsidized. So instead of and just taking that away would mean that people would buy less of these things and more of the apples, tomatoes, broccoli, things of that nature, and even attempt to prepare it, or like make like a big pot of stew, and then like last on a Sunday, with all these vegetables and stuff like that, and then last for the rest of the day. Um, so I mean, there could be a bit of a distinction with the food. I take it on that it's more that it's a characteristic of people who are in a lower social economic state, and yes, I appreciate that may harm children. At the very least, like if they're high on sugar, forget the nutrition for a second. If they're high on sugar, they would do poorly on schoolwork, and they would be very tired most of the time after the sugar hit goes down. Um, but yeah, I mean, I enjoyed the conversation, and I don't think I have too much to add, but I thought it was very informative and very, very nice.
Cool, man. Thanks. Yeah, I'll just quickly respond to those new points that you said. So Warren Buffett, he's always drinking Coke, quote unquote, and in every video you see, he's got a can of Coke. That's because he he owns Coke, right? So obviously he would, because and I think he owns McDonald's. When I say owns, I don't mean he's necessarily the majority shareholder, but I think he is like one of the largest shareholders of or stockholders of Coke, McDonald's, Nestle. I could reel off a whole bunch of these ones. So of course, what Warren Buffett's stuffing his face with fast food and Coke every single day. Like he's got Nutella up to his eyeballs, of course. But off camera, he's probably not eating that food because he's got an incentive to promote it. But in terms of removing subsidies, I do agree that less people would eat Mars bars and spam if it costs 5 times the price or even double the price. But I don't think it's linear. I think there's an inelasticity of demand when it comes to these junk foods, because you've got some people who say like that they'd rather die than eat broccoli, or that they love eating meat and that's what they eat. And so if meat was double the price, they would be really pissed off, but they would still pay it, because to a certain degree there's inelasticity of demand when it comes to these junk foods and these unhealthy foods. So I agree with you to a certain extent, but I don't think it explains away. I don't think subsidies will explain everything away. I really think that, um, like you saying that when you saw that your girlfriend was pregnant, you were like, "Yep, I'm going to step up and I'm going to like provide." That is highly respectable, and I'd like to think that everyone in the world would do the same. But unfortunately, it's not the case. And as I read those statistics out, we can talk about what food insecurity actually means, but 10% of the UK has food insecurity of children, so severe food insecurity of children. So I think it's not only do you agree in the case of Africa, it is also quite prevalent in the UK as well. So it's not just like a fringe case in the UK as well. So I'm not sure what the goalposts are or whatever for this discussion, but yeah, it's been a nice discussion, and I don't know if we're going to vote or not, or do all of that malarkey, but
Let's leave
I
it
guess
to
it's up to you.
Stone. Let's see what
Yeah,
Stone decides.
let's see what Stone says. We'll just
Stone will be the final person who gets to make the decision.
yeah, we just pass the box to Stone.
Yeah.